Welcome. My name is Simon Han. I'm the CEO of DeakinCo. It's our absolute pleasure to be your host here today. A lot of new faces on the list. We run these series of events quite regularly, and I said to Georgie, our marketing manager, what's going on? Where have we found all these new people from? She said, they're all Anneli's people. So so thank you and welcome if you haven't been to DeakinCo before. We're the corporate education arm of Deakin University, and we work with organisations to help develop workforce capability development programs. We run events like this probably 8 or 9 a year, and really looking to provide an opportunity to offer some thought leadership back to the L&D and OD and general HR communities. So very fortunate to have Anneli, renowned author, speaker and consultant. As you're probably aware, Anneli has a range of expertise, particularly around interpersonal skills and intelligence, and she spoke on that topic at an event here last year, and the feedback was so positive we thought it'd be great to get her back again, and particularly when she recently shared that she put some work into a white paper around women in leadership. And women in leadership is one of those topics that the data has been really clear for a long time now, that organisations that have a more proportional or balanced representation of women in leadership positions perform better financially, they have high levels of employee engagement and better overall cultures. The challenge really is how to address the historical balance, and that's what Anneli's going to talk about today, some of the challenges around how that's unwinding. On a personal note, I want to congratulate Anneli on her recent wedding. Anneli got married in April, and the reason I know this is that she was lucky enough to run into me in the restaurant of a hotel in Paris on the first night of her honeymoon. So she really lucked out, didn't she? So
and can I just say, my husband's in the corner at the front over there.
Congratulations
Hello,
to you too.
Do you remember Simon from Paris?
We both just got off that horrible 24-hour flight to Paris, so I think we're pretty keen just to say quick hellos, eat quickly, and disappear to respective hotel rooms. So, but terrific to have Anneli here, and with that, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thanks, Simon. Thank you, as always, for that wonderfully warm and generous introduction. And welcome my husband, Jason. You know, when you first get married, it's really hard to stop saying the words. It's very fresh. This is a conversation I have been wanting to have for a very, very long time. And by the rate at which people responded to this invitation, and not only responded but oversubscribed to this event today, yes, we had a wait list. Some of you would have noticed that all of a sudden you were on the wait list and all of a sudden you were in. That's because we pulled some strings, we rearranged the room so that we could fit more people into this conversation. It is my belief we are overdue for this conversation, so I wanted to make as much room for as many people as possible today. So welcome and thank you so much for coming. Today's conversation will be about women in leadership from a new perspective. The first half of the conversation will be me talking a little bit about some new ideas and some thinking in this space. I'm particularly keen to explore why there are still too few men in these conversations, why we're still having to have these conversations in the first place, and why I think we're solving for the wrong problem in the first place. Then I'll hand the reins over to the collective wisdom in the room. That's you. The second part of the conversation will be me posing a couple of questions to stimulate some discussion from the people in the room who are doing this live time in your organisations. So I want to hear from you about what's working well, what is still challenging you, and what can we learn for each other right here, right today in this discussion. So please come with your hardest question, your toughest challenge, and your biggest win, because the more we can share with each other in the moment right now, the more we'll get out of this conversation today. Fair deal? Good. You are a compliant bunch. Excellent. Good. You've all had your morning coffee. Glad to hear it. Okay, so a quick side note. I'm assuming that you are here because you all understand the importance of women in leadership. Yes?
Yes.
Yes, good. All right. So, I shan't bang on about how having more women in leadership roles increases the revenue, the performance, the engagement, even the collective intelligence of a group. No, I shall not bang on about all those positives. I'm assuming you already understand the imperative and the reason for the conversation today. So let's just do a quick check-in with who we've got in the room. So, hands up my independent consultants. Who works for themselves? Oh, quite a few. Okay, good. People needing work, look around. Right, that's right, hands up higher, consultants. There we go. Okay, good. So I'm looking forward to your perspectives on not only your own experience, but from what you're noticing that's happening out in the marketplace right now. Who here works for an organisation? I'm assuming that's the rest of you. Okay, fantastic. Keep your hands up if you work in HR or in the diversity inclusion space in some way. Okay, good. Eyeball someone across the room right now. These are the people I'm eyeballing. It's not up here, it's here. You might want to make some connections with these people afterwards if they are on a journey similar to yours. Is there anyone here who has been invited, dragged here by somebody else today? Anyone invited by somebody else today? You were? Yes, a couple of hands. It's okay, you can be proud about that. It's all right. Excellent. Thank you for trusting your colleague. You're in good hands. It is okay. You are safe with us in the room today. The challenge with the gender diversity debate today is not the challenge we think it is. We're treating bias and gender equity like it's something that needs an attitude change, but we're beyond that. We can't be investing all our time around just building awareness of this issue anymore. Now, I'm not suggesting that awareness is not important, it's in fact critical, but we can't be doing just awareness without anything else if we want the results that we're really aiming for. We need to understand that just because we know better doesn't mean we do better. I mean, let's face it. How many of you know you shouldn't eat as much as you do? Hands up, come on. That's right, thank you very much. As many wines as you have or beers, that's right, exactly. So we know that knowing better doesn't mean we do better, yeah? And yet we still persist with this idea. If we just give people the right information, they will do the right thing with the information. But it's not really the case. If that were true, we would not be sending as many drunk texts. Isn't that right, people? That's right. We must search for the solution in the structures that hold our actions in place, not just the biases and beliefs that created them in the first place. Yeah, we need a different solution. We need to change the conversation. The Norwegian government did this, and they did this in a really interesting way. In 2003, they introduced some legislation which mandated a requirement for 40% women in board positions with companies that were publicly listed or owned. Nothing happened. In 2006, the Norwegian government introduced some hefty penalties for non-compliance with this new act. If your company did not reach said quotas, that it would be delisted. Some very, very harsh penalties. Of course, the business community went nuts. They said, no, we don't want these harsh penalties, thank you very much. If this is what you want, we will comply, but we will do it on our own terms. We will meet that quota. 2 years later, what do you think happened? Nothing, correct, nothing happened. So the government gave the business community 2 years to write the ratios and still nothing happened. And so on January 1st, 2008, they introduced the fines and the penalties for non-compliance. How long do you think it took for the business community to reach 40%? Oh, that's very optimistic. Look at you, that's why you're here. 1 year. By 2009, they'd reached that quota, right? So it's completely possible. And what I find really interesting about this case study is that there was a lot of hubbub, right? You can imagine, no quotas, boo quotas, we'll lose our freedom and democracy and all these things. But after all was said and done, after they actually were on the other side of all the action required, it was interesting how many attitudes changed after the actions changed. The biggest dissenters, the biggest lobbyists against it became advocates for it. Really interesting. Now, we've known about this human tendency to know better but not necessarily do better for quite some time. In fact, in 1973, two psychologists from Princeton University, John Darley Daniel Batson, did a really interesting social experiment on helping behaviours. Very famous study on helping behaviours. So they got a group of divinity students, or Seminole students in their campus, and asked them to do a particular task. Now, Seminole students, these folks, are studying to be good Christian leaders. This is a very important part of the study. They're studying to be good Christian leaders. So they divided them into two groups. The first group were asked to do a presentation right across the other side of campus on a parable in the Bible on the Good Samaritan. The second group were asked to do a presentation on the employment opportunities of divinity students after graduation, right? Very, very different topic. You don't want to go to that one. It's not quite as exciting. So they had two different topics running. Both of these had to be given across the other side of campus. Now, of course, as psychologists want to do, they've introduced a little bit of a something. You never ever want to work at a university where there are psychologists on campus, because I'm telling you, if anyone asks you a question, you say no, just in case. You'll be part of an experiment. So what they did was they planted a person in need on the path of the people as they were going towards their presentation. So it was a man, he was clearly in distress, in desperate need of help. He was bent over, he was coughing, he was groaning, he was wheezing. He was acting as if he'd just been mugged. And they were wanting to understand who would stop and help and who wouldn't and why. Now, there's one more piece to this story. Some of the individuals were told that they were running late already for their presentation, and some were told they had plenty of time to spare. Who do you think stopped? Those that had plenty of time to spare. Yeah. Right. Absolutely. So what actually happened was, out of those that had plenty of time to spare, they stopped 63% of the time. Not bad. Out of those that were running late already, only 10% stopped. I know, it's disappointing, isn't it? We just want to believe we're better people, don't we? We're just not. I'm telling you, we're busy. We've got other things on our mind. Now, these were divinity Seminole students. Half of them were gearing up to give a talk on being a good Samaritan, right? And on their way to this talk, they did not have time to be a good Samaritan because I'm giving a talk. I'm being a good Samaritan. It's much more important, right? So isn't it interesting that these people's identity was wrapped up in a really strong belief around compassion and mercy, and yet, the pressures of the outside forces of our day-to-day lives and commitments meant that they would step over someone in need against their own better judgment to reach a different outcome. Isn't that interesting? In order to make progress on this conversation today, we need to understand where we are in the conversation today. So I want to talk you through a model I've put together called the Diversity and Inclusion Maturity Model. And it's just it's a talking point really for us to understand where we might be at individually or within our organisations, so we can see where we've been, where we are, and what work we've got to come. So there are three sections to this particular graph. The first section I call the toxic tragics, for clearly obvious reasons. If you've picked up the paper of late, you'll know these companies. So these are companies that don't do diversity inclusion very well. They're in all the headlines for all the wrong reasons. Snapchat, Uber, just name a few, you know who they are. These individuals and organisations essentially don't care about this important topic. And this is where we are. The second group I call the middle majority, again, for obvious reasons. You see there's a pattern. This is a bell curve. So in the middle majority, because it's so large, we have two distinct groups. And they all sort of merge. There's no hard and fast lines within this. We're sort of merging on a continuum, if you like. So the first part of the middle majority are organisations that are still experiencing explicit bias, either in pockets or within individuals, but there is still a sense that something's really not right. And they don't really know how bad the bias is within their organisations. The second part of the middle majority is where we now are starting to experience bias in a different way. So first generation bias was really in your face. Second generation bias is really just in the space. And it feels different. The quality is somewhat refined and benign. So people in this particular area are not necessarily experiencing blatant prejudice or bias. And people in this space don't feel like they are being biased towards people explicitly. And yet, when we do a deep dive, the statistics still tell us it is not right. So it's kind of like when you bake a cake in an oven that's got old crusty food from many terrible mistakes in the oven, and you take the cake out and it looks fine, but it smells a little off. Something's not quite right. And this is second generation bias. So it's something that we've inherited, and it's caught in the legacy systems and structures from generations before us. This is the home of the Good Samaritan. We know better, but we just don't do better. And our third group are what I call the bias breakers. And in the bias breakers, we have a select group of progressive organisations who are bold for change, who are investing in actions and accountabilities to really make a difference to this issue. A lot of these organisations are in the room today. So we've got, so for example, Energy Australia on International Women's Day, you might recall, they announced that they literally almost overnight fixed their gender pay gap. Overnight. So these are really bold moves that organisations are making. Ernst & Young, Mint Ellison, Deakin University are recognised for these sorts of actions. Mercedes-Benz, lots of these people in the room today. So what we're looking at are organisations that are investing in actions. They're signing up for hashtags, panel pledge, champions of change, flexism, all these really great initiatives. We need to take a leaf out of the Norwegian government's book. We need to have faith that if we change the actions, the attitudes will follow. Now, the conversation we've been having to date has been around awareness. So when toxic tragics ruled the world, and some of them still exist, we needed to talk about awareness, just to lift the conversation, or actually have the conversation in the first place. Now, as we're heading towards a more refined sense of bias, we are having conversations around the agreement. We all agree that this is stuff that we need to be doing. And yet, if we really want to make a difference that changes our experience, we need to change our actions. Women need help to progress, not because they are broken, but because they are surrounded by a cultural system that doesn't know how to value them. That's why we're here today. So, you must all be wondering, well, Anneli, tell me then, how do we break bias? Well, I'm glad you asked, Terry. Thanks for asking. What we need to do is we need to be thinking about the problem from a different perspective. We are not solving the problem we think we are. And I want to talk about 3 specific shifts we need to make to reorient our actions and activities. Number 1, it's not about awareness, it's about action. I really can't say this enough. It's no longer about awareness, it's about action. I actually don't care what you believe anymore. I care how you behave. I care how you behave. So we've fallen into this trap of thinking that people have enough cognitive capacity in their day to make better decisions. And I'm telling you, we are hard-pressed to make average default decisions most of the time. We're just too busy. There was some research recently that talked about 65% of executives facing this issue of the overwhelmed employee. You might have heard this term come out a little bit recently. And the overwhelmed employee is a real thing. On average, workers are overwhelmed, they're overworked, and they're overstressed. And what this means is we have got people in the workforce that are operating with a brain tank that is so full of stuff that we haven't got the space to be making right decisions, let alone acting on those decisions. And so knowing this, we need to make sure that we move away from people's understanding as the main motivation for a change in behaviour. And we need to find ways to embed their actions and activities in their day-to-day work so they actually don't need to think about it. We don't need you to think about whether or not you should stop and help. We want you to just not be able to walk past without helping. Wouldn't that be a great thing? So let's take a common example. For example, meetings. I'm sure you've probably had 10 already today and 4 more when you get back to work. So the common experience of a meeting. So what we're heading for now in the space of diversity is people to experience an inclusive meeting environment, yeah? So we want people to feel comfortable to contribute, and we want all voices to be heard. Great. Everyone's nodding because we're all aware of the problem and we're all in agreement, but we're kind of crappy at it. I'm just telling you. Why? Because we're busy and we're always overrun with the agenda, are we not? And it's really easy to be pulled into the loudest, the quickest, most confident voices to give you the answer you so desperately want so we can move on to the next agenda. Am I right? Yes. Amen, sisters and brothers. Yes. So it's the divinity thing's really got me going now. So we know that what we need to do is start embedding these choices into our behaviours. And if we take the meeting as an example, now I want to make this a little bit more relevant to the conversation today. So let's look at some common patterns of the way men and women communicate. Now let me say up front, this is a loaded conversation. When I talk about common patterns of men and women, I'm talking about average common experiences that are being reported on, that have been researched to the hilt, like Simon suggested. And having said that, it may not be your experience. It may not be every single person's experience. There are exceptions to every rule. But is it okay if we talk about this in general terms? Otherwise, we will never be able to have a conversation about it. Okay, good. So in terms of dynamics with men and women and typical communication patterns, what we notice is women have a tendency to hold back. Men have a tendency to push forward. That's just the way it goes. So what we notice is that women are likely to underestimate their abilities and performance. They wait for perfection. They downplay accomplishments and they hedge their language when they're contributing in a conversation with a group. Women are socialised to communicate in specific ways so as to avoid a social backlash. They don't always communicate in these ways in different contexts. This is really, really important to hear. Men, on the other hand, a tendency to overestimate abilities and performance, take more risks, claim credit for their work, and have the luxury, if you like, of using strong, direct language because they don't need to fear a social backlash. Their style of communication is the norm, it's the majority, and so it's more easily heard and accepted by the group. Yeah, that's a fair statement? Okay, so what that means is we have this dynamic of men pushing forward and women holding back, which leaves us with men dominating the conversation 75% of the time. It's not their fault, it's just the way it is, right? It's just the way it turns out. Men feel comfortable making contributions, speaking up and being heard. Women feel less comfortable doing so because there are social backlashes involved and invisible barriers along the way that make it less easy for them to do so. So we could send everyone to a training course on bias and awareness and go, hey, this is a crappy situation. We should fix this. Does everyone agree? And everyone goes, yes, we agree. We need to fix this. We need to be way more inclusive. But I'm just so busy. I just got to step over that person that's laying on the ground on my way to the meeting, right? So forget that. I don't care about awareness and agreement. I care about actions. So let's make it really, really easy. Let's make it super simple. Here are a couple of things that you can do to solve this problem straight away, some practical actions. So when you're having meetings, you can create some communication contracts where one person talks at a time. That is a simple rule, sometimes hard to execute, simple rule. And it's a matter of helping people with signals with each other and collective agreements going in up front to say, here's how I'm going to hold the floor. I'll let you know when it's time to step in. And agreements on, hey, I need to step in now because you're going way over time, because you know that still happens, right? And we need to be able to cut in and cut off at some stages, but we need to do it with respect and with permission. So let's create some agreements around who gets to hold the floor and for how long. Number one, super simple. Number two, everyone speaks at least once. Again, these are not difficult things. They're not mind-blowing. But it's not about knowing better, people. It's about doing better. So everyone speaks at least once. This is not even just the responsibility of the leader. This is the responsibility of everyone in the room. You could do this in a different way. You could have a buddy system where I'm in a meeting and I notice that my buddy hasn't spoken for 45 minutes. I might say, hey Dave, I'm wondering what your perspective is on this right now. Could you share some thoughts? And someone else has got me in mind if I haven't spoken up for a while. And all you need to care about is one other person, but everyone is caring about someone in the room. This is a way to help us make sure we have all these contributions that are really important. Third thing is you can circulate the agenda ahead of time. Not everyone is comfortable speaking off the cuff, yeah? Not everyone is comfortable being a quick thinker and contributing on the fly. Some people want time to think, to process, to do some research, to get their ideas clear before they have the confidence or the courage or the perspective to make the contribution they want to make in the meeting. So make it easy for them. Just let them know what you're talking about ahead of time, where possible. Dr. Heidi Grant is a social psychologist and author, and I love this quote from her. It's really, really apt in today's environment. If we are not actively including, we are accidentally excluding. Remember, this is not about awareness and agreement. It has to be about actions. How are you actually including people? Actively, choicefully. So this is the second big shift we need to make. The second big shift we need to make is to understand that this is not about the sisters, people. It's about society. It's not about sisters, it's about society. So I have a beautiful 13-year-old stepdaughter. Her name is Sienna. And a couple of years ago, she went through a phase of dabbing. Does anyone know what on earth I am talking about? Hands up, who knows what dabbing is? Okay, parents of about 10 to 13-year-olds, nice, okay. Is anyone willing to show me a dab? No? Oh, come on, really? No one? Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much. So for those of you who missed it, this is what a dab is, or something like this. I'm sure this will not be correct, okay? Right, you've seen it on the internet, you've seen it on TV, you're wondering, what are these people doing? I don't know what they're doing. I don't have the answers for you. I can just tell you what it is. So this is a dab, like, yeah. So, you know, they shoot a hoop, score a goal, yeah. It's a dab, right? It's like, yeah, high five. But you do it on your own. I don't know. I'm an adult, so I don't understand it. That's my prerogative. So the thing about a dab is that it's really cool, or it was. It's not cool anymore, I'm told. But at the time, it's really hard to keep track of. At the time, dabbing was really cool and all the kids were doing it, and you would even make friends by doing it, right? It was the thing to do. If you're an adult, it is not cool. Do not do this at home. The kids don't like it, I'm just saying. They will run away from you. They do not like it at all. So isn't that interesting? There is a social expectation of what's appropriate behaviour for a parent and what is appropriate behaviour for a child. And there's nothing inherently cool or uncool about this move. I mean, what is that move? What is that move? It's just something we made up. It could be this. I don't know. It doesn't mean anything. But what makes it interesting, or what makes it cool or uncool, is who's doing the viewing and who's doing the doing. Right? And what that means about us. And I find this really interesting. We don't see the behaviour for what it is, we see it based on who we are. And women face this in the form of social backlash in the workplace. It's really, really interesting. So women are expected to operate or to turn up with certain behaviours that make people feel comfortable with their role in society, right? So women are supposed to be nurturing and supportive and helpful and humble and all those good things. All those good things we were socialised to be as good girls, right? This has been going on for generations. And so there's an expectation in the workplace that that's how you operate and interact with other people. And when you don't, all of a sudden you get a backlash and get told, get back in your box. That's not how we're used to experiencing you. We don't know what to do with these other behaviours that you're exhibiting. And if you're a 13-year-old doing the dabbing, you'd get that, oh my God, Mum, it's so uncool. But in the workplace, it doesn't turn out like that. It comes out a little bit differently, but it still comes out. So women are told to fix themselves, right? We need to fix the women. We don't need to fix the women. We need to fix the way they're viewed. But here's some of the advice that we get. You need to be more confident. Be more, because you're all humble and nice and whatever. You need to be more confident. Great. But just don't be, just don't be so arrogant. Okay, so be visible, but just don't be so boastful because it doesn't look good on you. It doesn't suit you. Be assertive. Oh, honey, just don't be so aggressive. Calm down. Calm down there, Jess. Calm down. And this is really confusing for women. And I'm not saying this happens all the time, but I'm saying it happens enough. There is a pattern around this. And it is really hard. It's actually really hard to understand. Because as a woman, you're thinking, I want to do the right thing. I want to be visible. I want to be confident. I'm trying to win at this game of work. And this is the sort of advice that I'm getting. But when I do it, it backfires and I don't really understand what's going on. And men don't understand what's going on either because they're giving the advice and then they sort of respond to it in a funny way. And can I say, the social backlash issue is not men against women. It's men and women against someone who's acting outside their stereotype. Be it a woman, be it a parent, be it a man acting outside their stereotype. Men who want to take part-time roles face this backlash. Men who leave early to pick up kids will face this backlash. Why? Because they're not holding up their role of the stereotypical male contributor, yeah? So as a society, we don't know how to hold people in fluid roles. We just box them and we go, that's where we're comfortable with you being, please stay there. I don't know what else to do with you. But clearly this is not working. This is not working for us. So what do we do about this? We need to be able to push back on these stereotypes. We need to find ways to support strong voices. We need to break the stereotypes so that it feels okay to hear women be bold and talk about their accomplishments. We can start by holding women up for their accomplishments, men and women. So if they do something well, tell other people about it. Women get a backlash for boasting about their achievements and accomplishments. We don't like it, it's too distasteful. But you can certainly brag on somebody else's behalf. All of you in this room. All of you in this room can also support men who want to take a career break. Men who want to work flexible hours. Men who don't want to work at all. Yeah? Let's support that. Let's support everybody who breaks the stereotype and celebrate it. Stop fixing women. Fix the social systems that hold them back. This is why it's not about the sisters. Okay, and the third perspective change we need to consider is that it's not about statistics, it's about the stories. We need more men in these conversations. Agreed? Yep. Congratulations actually to so many men for turning up in this conversation today. I'm delighted that you're here. Spontaneous round of applause from the ladies in the house. Gentlemen, spread the word, right? If you want to feel the love, turn up to a Women in Leadership event. Seriously, we love you for being here. This is really, really important. It's important to have men as part of this conversation. We know that if the mainstream, which right now in leadership positions is the men, we know that if the mainstream pick up the mantle for the marginalised edges, which right now is the women in leadership roles, then the system has to shift. It has to shift. But this means we need more men as part of the conversation, clearly. And I suspect we're going about it the wrong way. I think we're spending too much time talking about statistics and business cases and all those rational reasons why men should do the right thing and, get on board and, help have women in leadership. And some men are doing that. And some men are doing the right thing. And I just want to make it a little bit easier. My suspicion is that men aren't as involved in this conversation because they just don't feel the effects of it. They're not women. So they don't know what it feels like to be in this space. And why would they? I completely get that. It's kind of like expecting a tall person who goes shopping at Woolies to know what it feels like to be a short person to go shopping at Woolies. And if you're a tall person, I tell you right now, you're not thinking at all about the short person who's shopping at Woolies and can't reach the top shelf because that's never been your experience as an adult shopper. So why would you even think about it? It doesn't even come into your perspective. It has nothing to do with how good a person you are or whether you're doing the right thing. It's just not your experience. And I don't expect it to be your experience. People don't feel the effects of their privilege until it's lost to them. It is too hard for men to feel the loss of their privilege because there's so many of them holding leadership positions. It's very hard to quickly all of a sudden outnumber the men to go, see what it feels like? Yeah, so we should have different kind of conversations. That would be really helpful, thanks. It's just not going to happen that way. And I don't expect it to happen that way. But we need to do something about it to get more men involved in the conversation. So I have a hypothesis. My hypothesis is this: I think people pay more attention to issues when they're personally involved. So if you're a tall person and all of a sudden you go shopping with your favourite Grandpa Joe or Auntie Betty, who can't reach anything above eye height, all of a sudden you are more open to the ideas of what it takes to go shopping with someone who can't reach the top shelf. But you only care about that because it's personal to you. You only care because it's personal. So my question then is, how do we make it personal? When I have conversations with some of my male clients and we're talking about ideas around diversity and equality, and I hear all the right reasons why we're having this conversation, it's good for business, it's good for the women, it's the right thing to do, yada yada, and I say yes, all of those things, I tell you every single conversation ends in the same way, no matter who the client is. And it ends something like this: but you know, at the end of the day, Anneli, I've got a couple of daughters. And I just hate the idea that my daughters in the workforce are not going to be paid the same amount as men for the same work. I don't understand that. And I can't understand why they might not get a job because they're a woman. I just don't understand that. But I know it's happening. And I know that the choices I make today and the decisions I take today will affect that future. We know that male CEOs who have a daughter are more likely to hire a woman to the board. We know that when male CEOs have daughters, that they give all their staff a pay rise, and women get paid on average more than men. They still don't get paid as much as men, but they get paid on average more than men. The pay rise is more than men. So there is an impact, an immediate impact when you make it personal for someone involved. So I'm not asking men to care about women in general. I'm asking men to care about the women in their lives that they care about. And if we just take care of one person at a time, that is enough to shift this system. And it's really interesting, I noticed some of the men in the room today, some of them are husbands, not just mine, hey? He's fresh though, he's brand new, he has to be here. But some of them are people's husbands. They've been invited along. They're passionate about this because they're passionate about their wives. And they know that this is an important topic and an important issue. Isn't that interesting? So what do we do about this? The practical actions you can take in this sphere for women, is to share your stories. For men, it's to ask about women's stories. Get curious about Aunt Betty's shopping experience. Now, the other thing to add here is that in 2015, McKinsey did a study that showed that 70% of the men they researched agree, they're aware of, and they agree that diversity is important. Yep, because on the surface, we all agree that this is the right conversation to have. Yet only 12% of them thought women had fewer opportunities. So what they're saying is, we agree gender diversity is really, really important, but we really think it's kind of even already. Like, we don't really understand, we don't think women aren't getting the same opportunities. I don't understand it, because you can't understand it because you're not at the effect of it. Because this is the same thing as saying, I'm a tall person, and short person, tall person, we both go into Woolies and we both have $100, so we have the same opportunity to buy anything on the shelves that we want. And that is true, right? You absolutely have the same opportunity, and yet a short person has hidden obstacles along their path before they get to the checkout that a tall person doesn't. You can end up with the same product, but your path to get there was different. Your path to get there was different. Okay, I'm almost off my soapbox now, and you can almost have the reins. So, the world is changed by your example, not your opinion. We know things need to be different. We know this is the time for them to be different. We have moved past awareness through agreement. It is time for action. we need to do something different. Are you ready?
Thank you very much, Anneli. I think your plant in the crowd said it best in terms of what a great presentation. But no, look, fantastic. And I think, the key takeaways for me is this is a topic we should be passionate about, and this is a topic that does require action. And I think you put a really compelling and entertaining case for that. So thanks again. For those that were enjoying the conversation, please feel free to stick around, and I'm sure Anneli will be here for a little bit. Or if you want to keep your conversation going with the people that you've been talking to, feel free to stick around, and we hope to see you at a future DeakinCo event. Have a great weekend, everyone. Thanks.